So all week long I've been talking to you about understanding 2 Chronicles chapter 7 and verse 14. And as we have a greater understanding of 2 Chronicles 7:14, yesterday I talked to you about the significance of being a child of God and being called by His name. And friends, when we truly begin to understand that, when we truly begin to wrap our minds around what it means to be a child of God, how we've become a child of God, though we're wretched, wicked sinners, we have been saved by the sacrifice that Jesus Christ has made for us on the cross of Calvary. You know what that ought to do? That ought to humble us. When we understand that not only are we saved, but we're called by His name. We're adopted heirs in Jesus Christ. We are His very own children. And so what a phenomenal thing to be a child of God that is called by His name. And that ought to automatically humble you right then and there. Not only are we called by His name by name, but we're called by His name to give Him glory, to give Him honor, and we're called by His name to serve Him. So if you're not serving Him today, friends, I don't care who you are or where you are, God's called you to serve Him, and if you're not serving Him, you need to repent, get right, and get busy serving God in the capacity in which He's called you to be. How do you know you're called to serve God? If you're a born-again believer in Jesus Christ, God has called you to serve Him. Now, it may not be to be a pastor. It may not be to be in any, evangelist or a missionary or something like that, but God has called you to serve Him in a capacity that gives honor and glory to Him and is a blessing to His church and is a blessing to humanity as a whole. Now, I can't tell you what God's called you to, but I can guarantee you He's called you to do something because you are His child, and we're out there to give glory and honor to Him in the service in which we do for Him. And so as we begin to understand that, begin to wrap our minds around that, friend, that ought to humble us. And as it humbles us, you know what it ought to do? It ought to get us down on our knees and say, you know what, God, me serving you is far beyond any capabilities that I have. You know, one of the unfortunate things of the church that we have today, the things that we have of the church today is we have church down to a science. I mean, we have it down to perfection. We know how to do church. And so we have the finances, and we have the buildings, and we have the programs, and we have the education, and we have all of those things to where we have it down right to a science to where we think that we could do it to perfection, but what we're doing most often is doing it apart from God. And friends, if you're not humbled before God, humility is two things. It's number one, total obedience to God, and number two, it's total surrender to God and saying, God, I can't do this. I can't do this on my own. I don't have the power. I don't have the strength. I don't have the wisdom, and apart from you, I don't even have the want to. And so what that ought to do, it ought to get you down on your knees praying, and as you pray, you're seeking the face of God. God, I need you. God, this church needs you. God, this community needs you. God, our nation needs you. I can't do this. Our church can't do this. If we all get together with all of our resources and pull them together, this is so far beyond us. God, we need you, and it causes us to humble ourselves and pray and seek His face, and that as we humble ourselves and pray and begin to seek His face, you know what's going to happen is we're going to come into His presence, and God is going to begin to do a work within our lives, and God is going to begin to do a work within our church's life. And you know what that's going to do within our hearts? That's going to let us know that, hey, we have junk within our life that doesn't need to be there, and we need to get that junk out. And so then we're going to, just by being in the presence of God and God moving, we're going to start turning from our wicked ways, because God is going to convict us of that, and God is going to begin to flesh that out of our own flesh, or flush that out of our own flesh, and flush that out of our own churches, and flush that out of our own society. And God will use that in a way to purify us, and to where we are being able to be used even more of God. And so that's only going to happen if we understand that we are His children. We begin to humble ourselves, we begin to pray, and we begin to seek His face. The turning from our wicked ways is going to be the easiest and the most natural part when God begins to move within our own lives and God begins to move within our church's life. We're going to be absolutely compelled to repent of the wickednesses in our life. Is there wickedness in the church today? Absolutely, there's wickedness in the church today. But you know what the greatest form of wickedness? We can go through a list. I mean, we can name thing after thing after thing. Of course, it fluctuates from church to church. We have all sorts of wickedness in the church today. But you know what the greatest form of wickedness is within the church of Jesus Christ today? That we have the arrogance to tell God no. God, no, I'm not going to read your word. God, no, I'm not going to pray. God, no, I'm not going to tithe. God, no, I'm not even going to go to church. God, no, I'm certainly not going to serve you. And I know my next door neighbor and even my children, my co-workers, I know that they're going to hell. I know that, but God, no, I'm not going to share the gospel with them. How arrogant and wicked it is for us to tell the Father no. That is vile. And friends, God will begin to pierce our hearts so that we will turn from our wicked ways. Now that's our part. We have our part. And God, no doubt, will do His part if we are faithful to do our part.